It's a strange thought, isn't it? We spend years, sometimes entire lifetimes, trying to prove we're competent, trying to earn respect, trying to be seen as the one who knows what's going on. But here's the paradox: the very moment we arrive at that point, when everyone looks to us for answers, is often the moment we stop learning. Because the need to appear smart becomes greater than the desire to become smarter. Being the stupidest in the room isn't about lacking intelligence. It's about having the courage to walk into a space where you don't have all the answers and being okay with that. It's about recognizing that growth doesn't happen in rooms where you dominate the conversation. It happens in rooms where you listen, absorb, and ask questions that make others pause and think. There's something deeply liberating about not needing to be the expert. When you're the least knowledgeable person in the room, you have nothing to defend, nothing to protect. You can be open, curious, and unguarded, and that openness is where true learning begins. Most people fear looking foolish. They fear saying, "I don't know," but the people who actually move forward the fastest, in business, in leadership, in life, are the ones who say it the most. Because "I don't know" isn't an admission of weakness, it's an invitation. It says, "Teach me, show me, help me understand." It's the moment you stop performing and start evolving. Think about this. If you're the smartest person in the room, then everyone else is learning from you. But who are you learning from? The moment you can't be challenged, you start to decline. Comfort is the silent killer of growth. It feels safe, but it slowly dulls your edge. When you put yourself in environments where others know more, you expose yourself to better ideas, sharper thinking, higher standards. You stretch your mind simply by being surrounded by people who see the world differently. You don't need to compete with them, you need to learn from them. And that takes humility, the quiet strength to say, "I'm here not to impress, but to improve." Because the truth is, being the smartest in the room might feed your ego, but being the stupidest in the room feeds your future. We've been taught to see being the stupidest as something to avoid, as if intelligence is a competition and the goal is to win. But what if we've misunderstood the game entirely? What if being the stupidest isn't a sign of inferiority, but a sign that you've placed yourself exactly where you should be in the presence of people who can expand you? The truth is, every environment we enter carries with it a hidden exchange of value. Some rooms feed our confidence, others feed our growth. The rooms that make us feel small, that stretch our understanding, that challenge how we see the world, those are the ones that transform us. When you find yourself in a space where others know more, it doesn't mean you don't belong. It means you've found fertile ground for evolution. Being the stupidest in the room is not about self-deprecation. It's about positioning yourself to absorb more wisdom than you could ever generate alone. It's the humility to accept that others might have mastered something you haven't yet, and the awareness to recognize that mastery is contagious if you're willing to listen. The danger of always trying to be the smartest person in the room is that you build an identity around being right. You start protecting that image instead of pursuing the truth. You stop asking questions, you stop taking risks. And before you know it, your learning curve flatlines. But when you accept that others might see what you don't, your world expands. Suddenly, you begin to notice connections you once missed, patterns you never saw, ideas that once intimidated you now start to inspire you. There's something deeply empowering about walking into a room and saying, "I have something to learn here." It's a quiet declaration of strength, not weakness. It says you growth over appearance, curiosity over ego. It says you're more interested in becoming better than in being seen as better. The irony is, the person who willingly takes the position of the stupidest will eventually become the one who understands the most. Because they've listened more, questioned more, and learned more than anyone else in the room. So when you find yourself surrounded by people who seem smarter, more experienced, more accomplished, don't shrink. Smile. You're in exactly the right place, because being the stupidest in the room doesn't mean you're behind. It means you're on your way up. Humility is a word we don't often associate with intelligence. We celebrate confidence, expertise, decisiveness, the people who walk into a room and seem to know exactly what they're talking about. But here's the quiet truth. Real intelligence doesn't come from what you know. It comes from your willingness to admit what you don't. Humility isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself accurately. It's the understanding that no matter how much you've achieved, there's still more to learn. When we lead with humility, we stop chasing validation and start seeking understanding. We stop trying to prove how much we know and begin to discover how much more there is to explore. The most remarkable people you'll ever meet are rarely the loudest in the room. They're the ones who listen. They don't need to dominate the conversation or prove their worth. Their humility allows them to absorb, to connect, to understand. They ask questions not to appear smart, but because they genuinely want to know. Humility creates space for others to share their knowledge, for ideas to breathe, for collaboration to happen. Ego, on the other hand, suffocates that space. It blocks out new perspectives because it's too busy protecting the illusion of certainty. But the moment we let go of ego, something beautiful happens. Curiosity returns, and curiosity is the foundation of growth. When you walk into a room and accept that you don't have all the answers, you give yourself permission to learn. You open yourself to being surprised, challenged, even corrected, and that's where transformation begins. It takes strength to say, I don't know. It takes maturity to say, teach me. It takes character to say, you might be right. Humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom in disguise. It's the understanding that knowledge is infinite, and that every person you meet holds a piece of it that you don't. The truly intelligent don't seek to be right, they seek to be better. And the best part, when you approach life with humility, people naturally want to teach you. They open up, they share, they trust you, because they can sense you're not there to compete. You're there to connect. So, don't mistake humility for smallness. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows that learning never ends. Because the moment you think you've learned enough is the moment you stop becoming more. We often assume that success belongs to the people who have all the answers, the ones who can walk into any room and speak with absolute certainty. But look closely at the people who continue to grow, the ones who evolve long after others have plateaued. They share one simple habit: they ask better questions. Questions are the language of curiosity. They are how we bridge the gap between what we know and what we have yet to understand. When you stop asking questions, you stop learning, you stop discovering, you stop seeing the world as something to explore and start seeing it as something to defend. And once that happens, your mind quietly begins to close. The irony is that most of us are trained to seek answers as proof of competence. In school, in our jobs, even in social settings, we're rewarded for what we know, not for what we seek to know. Yet every major breakthrough, every leap forward in human progress, began not with a statement, but with a question. Someone dared to ask why, or what if, or could there be another way? That's where innovation is born, not from certainty, but from curiosity. The people who never stop asking are the ones who never stop expanding. They understand that questions are not signs of weakness, but of depth. Because when you ask, you acknowledge that there's more to learn. You open a door for someone else to teach you, to challenge you, to help you see from a different angle. There's something powerful in a simple question like, what am I missing here? It shifts the focus from ego to awareness. It says, I care more about understanding than being right. And that mindset changes everything. It transforms conversations, relationships, and even leadership itself. The best leaders don't inspire others by pretending to know everything. They inspire by demonstrating the courage to keep learning. Asking questions also demands humility, the kind that allows you to stand in front of people who might know more and say, "I want to learn from you." That single act dismantles barriers, builds trust, and turns any room into a classroom. So if you ever find yourself in a room full of people who seem smarter, more experienced, more articulate, don't rush to prove yourself. Ask, listen, absorb, because answers may fill your mind, but questions they expand it. Growth never feels comfortable. In fact, it's often disguised as confusion, doubt, or even failure. When you find yourself sitting in a room where everyone seems more intelligent, more confident, more capable, that uneasy feeling that creeps in, that quiet voice whispering you don't belong here, that's not weakness, that's growth announcing itself. We have this mistaken belief that comfort is the reward for success. But comfort is not the goal, it's the signal that we've stopped stretching. Think about it, nothing alive grows without tension. Muscles don't strengthen without resistance. Minds don't expand without challenge. Progress, by its very nature, requires friction. And the discomfort we feel when we're surrounded by people who outthink or outperform us is not proof that we're failing. It's proof that we're evolving. The challenge is that our brains crave certainty. We're wired to seek safety, to stay where we feel competent. That's why stepping into a space where we're not the expert feels threatening. Our ego panics. It tells us to retreat to familiar ground, to return to the rooms where we already shine. But that instinct, while comfortable, is deceptive, because the very thing we're trying to avoid, the discomfort of not knowing, is exactly what propels us forward. When you allow yourself to sit in that discomfort instead of running from it, something powerful happens. You start paying attention in a way you never did before. You listen more intently. You observe how others think, how they solve problems, how they communicate ideas. You become a student again, and that's where real transformation begins. Discomfort strips away our illusions of mastery. It reminds us that growth doesn't happen in the applause. It happens in the struggle, in the humility of not knowing, in the willingness to look a little foolish while learning something new. That's the uncomfortable truth. Most people avoid the best opportunities for development, rarely come wrapped in confidence. They come wrapped in uncertainty, so the next time you feel out of place, remember, that feeling is evidence you've stepped beyond the boundaries of your old self. You are expanding into new territory, intellectually, emotionally, even spiritually. Growth doesn't whisper in comfort, it roars in discomfort. And the people who learn to stay in that roar, to breathe through it, to keep showing up, are the ones who outgrow everyone who chose to stay safe. Knowledge and ego have always had a complicated relationship. The more we learn, the more confident we become, and that's good, up to a point. But there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and crossing it is easier than most people think. The moment we start believing we know enough is the moment we stop truly learning, and that's where ego quietly begins to win. Ego loves certainty. It loves the feeling of being right. It convinces us that our perspective is complete, our understanding is deep enough, our way is the best way. But knowledge, real knowledge, demands the opposite. It demands curiosity, doubt, and humility. The people who continue to grow are the ones who recognize that what they don't know will always be larger than what they do. They don't see learning as a phase of life, they see it as a lifelong posture. The danger of ego is that it tricks us into mistaking information for wisdom. We might collect facts, degrees, experiences, but wisdom requires something more. It requires the awareness to keep learning, the discipline to keep questioning, and the humility to accept that we can be wrong. Ego blocks all three. It makes us defensive instead of open, reactive instead of reflective. When we're led by knowledge, we seek to understand. When we're led by ego, we seek to be understood. The difference is profound. One builds bridges, the other builds walls. The learner connects with people, ideas, and possibilities. The knower isolates themselves within the illusion of superiority. That's why the learner will always surpass the knower, because learning compounds while ego stagnates. In every field, the most remarkable people aren't the ones who declare themselves experts. They're the ones who remain endlessly curious. They ask, what else can I see? What else can I learn? What am I missing? They are perpetual students, and because of that, they're always evolving. Ego wants to look smart. Knowledge wants to become smart. Ego performs for approval. Knowledge grows for impact. And when you choose knowledge over ego, you not only expand your mind, you expand your life. So if you ever find yourself in a room where your ego whispers, you're behind, let knowledge remind you, you're becoming. Because those who keep learning never fall behind, they simply move further ahead of who they used to be.